I'm Jason Bradford.
I'm Asher Miller.
And I'm Rob Dietz. Welcome to Crazy Town, where the video for our theme song was filmed on the deck of our mega yacht.
Hi, this is Crazy Town producer Melody Allison. Thanks for listening. Here in Season 5, we're exploring false prophets and the dangerous messages they're so intent on spreading. If you like what you're hearing, please let some friends know about this episode or the podcast in general. Now, on to the show.
Hey Jason, hey Asher, I gotta tell you about a dude.
Nice story. Here we go. I love it.
Okay, so there's this guy right in your same circles. He goes to Georgetown University to get a grad degree in
Whose circles?
Yeah, your circles. These are the kind of guys you love. He's getting a government degree in national security, but then he goes to Harvard, or Harvard as we like to call it, to get a degree in business, right?
MBA.
So, yeah, of course. Most valuable degree on the planet. Earn the buck. So then he goes to work at Goldman Sachs.
Nice.
Okay.
Little company.
So just like
The American dream, baby.
just like you two were trying to do, right, in your
I
early
wasn't good
careers.
enough.
So a few years down the road, our investment banker guy uses his connections at Goldman Sachs to get $60 million in funding for this outfit called IGE, which, of course, is the Internet Gaming Entertainment Company. Okay, so they're based in Hong Kong. And they employed, this is what they did. They employed a whole bunch of low-wage workers and Chinese workers to play the World of Warcraft.
Their job is to play a video game.
They paid them to do that?
Yeah.
What a nice guy.
That's great.
He's
That's
giving them jobs and go play video games.
It's kind of the dream job, right? Like, here's some money, play a video game. We'll give you pixie sticks
This
and
is
an
one
occasional...
of those. This is one of those massive multiplayer online games.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
You don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Where you kill people.
Yeah, it's a role-playing
Yeah,
game. You
shoot
go
'em up.
around, sword and sorcery stuff. And you can earn treasures in the game. You can earn gold and special weapons and all that. And, you know, you have to sort of buy things virtually in the game. But it turned into a marketplace. Like, you could actually sell this stuff in the real world. So maybe you're a semi-wealthy dude sitting in your mom's basement in America.
I'm too lazy, or I suck at the game too much to actually earn all this myself.
You just go
so
buy
I just
it.
go buy it.
You level up.
Awesome.
From one of these expert players
Right.
who's gotten so much equipment they can just sell it to you.
Okay, so wait, this is like globalization in a video game, basically, right?
That's exactly what it. Yeah, you got the low wage
amazing.
earners, but then you
The low wage workers who are, doing
they're
stuff.
professional video game players.
Yeah, who create products, worthless products for high end consumers in the West who have extra money that I don't know what.
That's fantastic.
What a beautiful thing.
They can strut around in the virtual world with all their gear.
Right.
Well, and don't forget the $60 million that was basically funded this company.
Goldman Sachs is behind this. It's like a serious investment banks behind this scheme.
So they saw that there was that much profit in this.
Yeah.
The difference between what they were paying these poor guys who were playing this game and what they were selling the stupid shit on the game for was enough that it felt like worth a $60 million investment.
Of course. Yeah.
Wow.
Why not?
Amazing.
Well, so the mastermind behind all this happens to be our false prophet of the day. Little guy that you may know called Steve Bannon.
Little guy. I don't know.
Genius. This is freaking genius. Wow. Well,
we can all hope to emulate
it's
that
like the
sort of
evil
deal.
origin story. Actually, I've learned a lot about Steve Bannon. Never knew this about him.
it's pretty amazing. I mean, he had quite a life thus far, and we're gonna go
It ain't
over
over
his
yet.
It ain't over yet. So why are we talking about Bannon? Well, basically because he's got these pretty outlandish tactics that are designed to destroy contemporary society. And then he has really an odd vision of the world post-collapse. So it's those two things in combination that make him a false prophet. He basically wants to push society over the edge, and then he wants this other thing to emerge that I think is a little bit sketchy.
I mean, he's not happy to just watch it all burn on its own. He's not busy trying to prep for it.
He's putting fans on.
He's
it,
like,
the flames.
Let's hasten this thing.
And I think Steve Bannon would, on one level, seem like the most obvious of our false prophets in our list, just because of his crazy right-wing political views. But that's not really what we're focusing on. It's this idea that he's trying to blow things up.
I also think there's a lot to like how deep his philosophy goes, and it's fascinating where that comes from. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's back up a bit, and there's so much crazy stuff about Bannon we could go over. I'm just doing a quick rundown of like kind of the stuff that's happening now. He may go to jail for contempt of Congress any day now, and or for a scheme to defraud donors over the building of a border wall. It was just a grift.
I gave them so much money for that. Nothing.
Well, and that would be fitting because he really does have a lot of contempt for Congress.
He's interacting with a lot of a litany of sort of shady characters and dealings, run-ins with Jeffrey Epstein. One of his buddies is this Chinese billionaire, Go One Wei, who was raising money to establish an alternative Chinese government. and this guy might go to jail very soon too. He was with the infamous Cambridge Analytica, which was involved in the 2016 election and some interaction with Facebook there, weaponizing social media for Donald Trump and Brexit. He's been funding right-wing political candidates and sort of movements, both in the U.S. and overseas. Because of sort of the outlandish nature, the misinformation he's putting out, he's been banned on a lot of social media apps. He's been spreading disinformation like a norovirus running through a cruise ship.
Wait, he was spreading disinformation about a norovirus on the cruise ship?
No,
he's spreading it like a norovirus.
I appreciate your poetic license.
Thank
there.
you.
That was well done.
You just never know these days. It could have been something he was actually pushing.
He seems to have had a succession of pretty quick marriages and divorces 3 times now. And there's a lot of reports from people that have worked with him that he's really a class A jerk in many ways. Nowadays, you can find him on a podcast that runs twice a day live for an hour. It's called Bannon War Room. He has
twice a day?
He has a morning and an evening edition.
Oh, that's so lovely. Wake up with Steve. Go to bed with Steve. Oh,
what
a dream.
We'll get into a little bit more of the details of that show and what its style like.
Okay, so thank you for that run through. Let's talk about where he came from. He's born in 1953 in Virginia to a middle-class, blue-collar set of parents. They were pro-union. They were Kennedy Democrats. So you see the
So
roots
this
of
is
Bannon.
like a whole what was that guy on the TV show, Michael J. Fox's character?
Right,
Alex P. Keaton.
Alex P. Keaton.
It's also like you. It's a rebellion against views held by your parents.
Right. Sorry, Dad.
Okay, so he goes to a Catholic military prep school, gets a urban planning degree from Virginia Tech. So how come all these false prophets go to the same schools
What other
I
ones
go
went to the same school?
Well, Penn.
I don't know. We've talked about like Donald Trump in the past.
Okay.
We talked anyway.
Not too many. Come on.
That's why I almost didn't go to college because
You didn't go to Harvard or
associated.
Stanford, luckily, because there's like tons from those places. Or Yale. Oh my God,
they're not
those are the
taking
worst.
me anyway.
Yeah.
Then he goes into the Navy, where he gets stationed in the Persian Gulf during the Iran hostage crisis and the failed rescue attempt that happened there right around the beginning of 1980, I guess.
Yeah, 79 or 80, yeah.
And he said that was a big impact on his politics. He worked at the Pentagon, and then as I said before in the beginning, he goes to Georgetown and Harvard, so kind of an elite person himself.
Yeah, it's funny to think that, to recognize that, because so much of his rhetoric is sort of anti-elite.
Yeah,
right?
populist.
So, after those stints, he actually turned towards entertainment. He did that because when he got hired by Goldman Sachs, which we talked about earlier, as an investment banker in the mergers and acquisitions division, he went from New York to LA to work in the entertainment industry. I guess that they were
buying and selling companies.
Yeah, they were investing in that stuff. He ended up setting up his own company, Bannon & Co. in 1990. It was like a boutique investment bank for the entertainment industry. That got him a role as sort of an executive producer on a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Let me cut in here for a sec, because as the resident pop culture specialist here in Crazy Town, I I went over to IMDb to check out his list of movies.
Yeah, what's the Rotten Tomato score on these things?
Well, I don't know. Not real impressive. Okay. Let's just say that. Not a lot of big hits that you've heard of. You know?
He's no James Cameron.
No, he's not working with Steven Spielberg. Okay. You know.
But there's something like 19 films or something he's produced.
Yeah,
it's quite a bit.
Most of them are like bizarre right-wing documentaries, but pretty rough.
Everyone's got to do their thing.
He's got his niche. But anyhow, at about this time, actually, while he's got this Bannon and Company thing going on and funding kind of crazy movies a little bit, he actually helped save Biosphere 2. You remember Biosphere 2?
Yeah, that was the project to close an ecosystem, put some scientist inhabitants in there.
Yes, it's just outside of Tucson, Arizona, actually, north of Tucson. And
there was a documentary with Paul E. Shore about
that, right? What was that called again?
Biodome, I believe.
Yeah, documentary.
Yeah. I actually tried to visit it. So, there's a picture. I got a picture of me outside the front of it, but they charged so much money. There was a line. I just gave up. But
it's actually a pretty fascinating story how that whole thing failed.
Oh, yeah. So it fails completely.
Really interesting.
And there's this billionaire who wanted us to figure out how we were going to live on another planet and stuff like that, creating an ecosystem under a dome. It didn't work. The thing was a mess. And I think Bannon was brought in as this sort of hatchet man. And he basically...
like the Mitt Romney of the Biosphere too, right? Clean this thing up, basically. Fire all these people.
That's funny. I thought he was like the Mr. Wolf of Pulp Fiction coming in, the cleaner or whatever.
But anyway, you can see videos of Bannon talking about this to the press. And it essentially got bought out by, I think, Columbia University and now University of Arizona. And they run it as a research facility. So you did a good job.
But you seriously couldn't get in. I
could have paid a bunch of money and stayed in line, but I didn't have much time. I wanted to kind of go look at it real quick. Yeah. But no, they charge.
So it's a tourist attraction.
It's a big tourist attraction. Huh. Yeah. But then in 2005, he becomes a founding board member of the right-wing news outlet Breitbart News, and that's kind of what people know him for now, right?
Yeah.
And it was started by this guy named Breitbart, and the aim was to be a kind of Huffington Post, but on the right, okay? Mostly reposting other content. However, the founder, Breitbart, dies, and in 2012, Bannon took over as executive chairman, and he takes a more aggressive approach, really expands it, a lot more of their own staff. They have offices actually in many parts of the world, and they become aligned with the alt-right nationalist movements, which were openly racist. They basically, Bannon there's quotes you can say, Bannon basically saying, we are the news outlet for the alt-right.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
Good times. Before we move on to talking about Bannon's worldview, right? The world that he wants to bring to life. I find it fascinating, I gotta say, just running through that little bio. Dude spent some time in these single industry towns that are kind of interesting, right? So he spent time in New York, sort of Wall Street, right? DC,
sure.
And LA.
Uh-huh.
So no fucking wonder why he hates elites, right? Or says he hates elites.
Don't forget also the desert in Arizona where they only do biodomes.
That's right. What an industry town. I find that kind of interesting. The other thing is really interesting is, and this came out in a really interesting piece in Politico from 2017 by Eliana Johnson about the fact that he's apparently, obviously he went to these elite schools, but he's also a voracious reader. Mm-hmm. And in fact, she quotes someone in the piece she wrote, quote, "He's a voracious reader who devours works of history and political theory in an hour," quote unquote, said a former associate whom Bannon urged to read Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Quote, "He's like the Rain Man of nationalism." What a great vision.
Yeah, and we'll kind of outline what that really means, nationalism, a bit. I think a lot of people understand it, but I think we should shift then to his worldview then and how that leads to sort of nationalism. This was a rabbit hole I did not understand I was putting my head into.
Yeah, we lost you for a little while there, Jason.
We've talked about how our lead researcher, Alana Zuber, has been put through the ringer, having to delve into the biographies and the works of all these freaking false prophets. And I think when we take a lead on outlining these episodes, we get into that space too. And Alana and Jason are now talking about viewing videos of husky and golden retriever puppies to kind of get their equilibrium back.
Yeah.
Is it working?
We got to give them a few days.
I got to get through this episode first. I'm a little reactive right now, okay? It's a triggering episode. Okay, so Bannon follows the philosophy of what's known as traditionalism. And that basically says that truth, including morality, are knowable and unchanging. All right, you might cut in if you need to me to restate something, but I'm going to try to lay this out. They believe that there's these essential truths can be found through what is called divine revelation. And so many traditionalists read all kinds of ancient mystic religions and medieval philosophers. This could include Catholic scholars that, Bannon was raised a Catholic.
So wait, divine revelation, does that mean there's some deity who is handing the truth to some medieval scholar?
Well, they could be of any age. In other words, they're not prejudiced against the time period in which something happens, because they believe that these revelations could have happened to any person in the past, and they may have been written down, and that if they read all these ancient texts that have survived the ages because they were useful, they're considered important, that they might be able to glean some of these revealed truths.
Well, and what about like a Dan Brown novel? Can they get something out of that?
Yeah,
but
totally.
The bottom line is that they believe there are fixed truths.
Fixed truths that
Right.
there is perfect truth, there's perfect morality out there,
Right.
and that it comes from these sort of divine revelations. Okay,
Not from Oprah.
not from Oprah.
Not from Oprah.
Now, so the juxtaposition, sort of the opposite of traditionalism, is what we know of today as liberalism.
Not neoliberalism.
Not neoliberalism. So the incarnation we have today is sort of modernism as well, I would say. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of the glorification of the Enlightenment and science that the traditionalists say have sort of tossed out these wiser ways of the past. So traditionalists want to go back to social structures from these pre-Enlightenment eras, which ends up, of course, leading to rigid social roles for men and women. This tends to be very patriarchal. And the analogy they often use is that the leader of a nation is like the father of a family.
Yeah, I think Margaret Atwood described this pretty well in Handmaid's Tale, right?
Right. Okay, that's what I'm telling you. This is deep philosophical differences between these traditionalists and liberals.
And do you see the traditionalists as throwing out the science, kind of saying, or at least subjugating it to this social structure of the past?
Yeah, I think they would be very skeptical of science and technology if it is going to undermine these other truths, in a sense. And so
it's about this the idea of the Enlightenment and science and study or whatever is just that you're able to discover the world and to know things for yourself, right? And that's dangerous.
Well, yeah. Okay. So this is an interesting distinction that is about the role of sort of individuals versus the collective.
Yeah.
And so the contrast between traditionalism and liberalism, it can maybe it can be understood as a distinction between, the Enlightenment makes claims about the inherent human rights that are there, right? That we can
Of the individual, the rights of the individual.
Individual human rights, the philosophers can talk about why there are human rights and what they are. And it's a lot of focus on the individual. Traditionalists emphasize that individuals actually have duty, and it's virtuous for them to fulfill their role in society. And so...
Quick idea.
In traditional roles.
Yes.
Right.
Quick idea. Could we take Steven Pinker, remember his book Enlightenment Now, and we could have him duke it out with Steve Bannon.
Traditionalism now.
Oh my God.
That'd be awesome. Let's put them in a ring together.
We might get a decent philosophy out of that
or just a great
match.
MMA fight.
Yes. So you can see how vastly different a worldview this is between what most people that live in modern society, Enlightenment era, hundreds of years back, we have sort of swept aside these traditionalist views. They often agree that, a monarchy is a good thing. These inherited roles are actually a good thing to have.
Yeah, it's a father
figure
of the family.
I watched a lot of Schoolhouse Rock episodes, and it's pretty clear that the king is no good. Right. Pretty clear.
So they would say that the king, like a father, has a duty to perform well at their role. And if they don't, maybe they should be kicked out as king. Right. So it's not like they say that there can't be bad kings. It's just that there are right and proper roles that you have to follow. Now, traditionalism does not itself espouse fascism. However, it quickly veers towards it. If you follow those who have taken up traditionalism as a philosophy and moved into the political realm, you can imagine that since they have these idealized truths, they also end up having, there are best races or best ideas. And these forms are in contrast to others who end up being these demonized minorities. So it can get ugly very quickly.
It's a recipe for scapegoating, it sounds like.
Yep.
So, obviously you can see some danger in that kind of philosophy, but I think that pivots us to the danger that you see in the tactics that Bannon actually employs to get this philosophy out and about as far as wide as he can.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, Asher, when you were talking about Rain Man of nationalism
right,
that Bannon was pitching The Art of War by Sun Tzu on his friends. You guys ever read that book?
I have not.
No.
I've read it.
Yeah? In the original?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You don't want a translation.
No,
come on.
You can't trust those things.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in there about how to defeat your enemy, right? You sow confusion.
You take their feet off?
I don't remember that part, but I could have been misreading.
He was trying to literal. I got the thing. Defeat.
Right.
Good. Yeah. Good one.
Good.
Oh,
good one, Jason.
God, I thought I was supposed to be the one who the traditionalist king of bad puns.
Dad joke. Sorry.
That was so good.
Okay, so
the collective groan right now.
Yeah. Thanks for that Bannon-esque disruption to my train of thought. So yeah, his whole thing is in The Art of War is you want to disrupt what your enemy is doing. You want to sow confusion. Hit them where they're weakest. Turn your weaknesses into strengths. All that kind of stuff.
It's funny, that the British did not read this before they showed up in redcoats.
No.
And just sort of in lines with guns. It's the stupidest thing. I couldn't believe. What are they doing?
What are they? Yeah.
That was the right and sporting way the honorable way, to kill each other, right? Stand in a line together.
But then again, after reading the book, I never went out and secured $60 million for a sham gaming operation. So
and that's why you're no Bannon.
I know.
Well, so we should talk about probably the most famous or the most well-known area that Bannon has engaged in terms of trying to bring forward this vision of the future, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we should be clear here. He's wanting to collapse the existing system.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not just having a vision that someday this will revert back to a form of traditionalism.
Yeah, using normal political arguments and ballot boxes.
No,
that's not good enough.
No, it's not, we have to make this happen. So he's engaged directly in national politics, and he's done that primarily through the auspices of one Donald J. Trump. And there are a couple of ways I think that he's done that. The big one is becoming the right-hand man. He ran his campaign when he ran the first time for president and saw him, I think it's fair to say, as a truly disruptive force.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the approach was not one that he sort of invented. There's kind of a model based upon this man Evola who had
Julius Evola.
Yeah, Italian guy who had become sort of the right-hand man to Mussolini, Benito Mussolini, who became the...
Anytime you can follow the tactics of someone in the Mussolini government,
sold. Say no more.
Yeah, Bannon. Bannon really likes the Evola, and he's a pretty outlandish, scary traditionalist.
Right.
Yeah.
But Evola. So you can. I don't know if anyone's coined this as the Evola model, but there are others in the world who have attempted to do similar things. You look at Alexander Dugin in Russia. Some folks might know that name because I think his daughter was just assassinated or murdered in Russia. I think they were actually going after Dugin himself. This were pro-Ukrainian forces, supposedly, who had done this. And Dugin's been this very outspoken traditionalist, highly sort of uber-nationalistic Russian voice, pushing for much more aggression on the part of Russia.
And so you kind of wonder, you noticed how Trump kind of was praising Putin, all this sort of stuff. And you see a lot of this now, and this wing of the Republicans is a lot of sympathy for Putin. And it's because they share these traditionalist outlook.
Right.
Bannon was sort of the the Alexander Dugin.
And there are other strongmen.
Yep.
There's Bolsonaro in Brazil, and there's a man named Olavo de Carvalho who was also kind of a really close confidant or right-hand person to him in Brazil.
And Ben has met with him, I believe.
These guys have talked to each other. So the playbook here is get close to these guys and use them to advance your goals.
Well,
right?
I don't know about Evola, but I know about this right-hand man technique. I mean, I'm using it here at PCI.
What? You are?
Yeah, I'm in here trying to push my agenda.
On me?
Manipulate you to...
Wait, I've been trying to do that with Jason. Jason's the board president. Wait.
Oh, we gotta...
Who are you trying to manipulate, Jason?
I just want to go walk my dog and watch the birds. I mean...
Oh, manipulating the dog.
No wonder
season.
we're not getting anywhere. Jesus. Okay. Well, and then through Trump, obviously he was working within the administration. He wound up being kicked out of the Trump administration, but it was about trying to advance some regressive policies and stoke a lot of division. I mean, he really did see Trump as like this perfect, not even a foil, but a shit stirrer, basically. And it wasn't just as a public figure who's like offending people and, creating all kinds of division within society. It was also about enacting policies like the border wall and other things that may have aligned
Muslim
with
ban on the flights.
Yeah, it may have aligned with the traditionalist worldview, but it also was stoking a lot of division, right?
Yeah.
And then even when Trump lost, he could use him to sort of destroy the political system. You look at all the stop the steal rhetoric.
Yeah.
Bannon was really pushing January 6th, getting people to come together.
Yeah, that's why he's got a contempt for Congress. They want him to talk about it, and he won't show up.
That is really amazing from a tactical sense in employing these art of war philosophies.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter if he's the right-hand man anymore, right? He got kicked out from being the right-hand man, and he's still effective.
Well, I can tell you,
polarizing.
He and Trump are buddies again, and Bannon, I've been listening to his podcast. And oh my God, he is really pushing the MAGA movement and Trump and stuff. So they're buds again. I'll just let you know that.
Oh yeah, such great news. Well, okay, so another dangerous tactic that comes out of this art of war philosophy is his mastery at manipulating the masses. We can go back to that story of the IGE, the gaming thing with Warcraft, and their business model ended up failing in the end, but he became really interested in the whole online gaming community and figured out that he could be getting his political viewpoints and his messaging into that community. So really innovative way to recruit an army of potential January 6thers or
a lot of the internet trolling. They call this Gamergate, was one of the things where it's like somehow there's a spillover between these gaming communities and these aggressive men.
Yeah, I mean, basically an army of online trolls, and they actually were a force in the 2016 election, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he also had the Breitbart news editor, Milo Yiannopoulos, that Bannon had recruited, and they were activating an army through Breitbart as well. Yeah. So he's really good at looking at these kind of niche messaging methods and manipulating a whole slew of people to his cause.
Yeah, so there's a lot of use of media. Of course, Breitbart and now his War Room, the podcast.
Which you've been listening to I'm regularly.
Yes.
That's why you're wearing that shirt, right? The War Room shirt that you're wearing.
Yeah. Full of disinformation, misinformation. It's fascinating. There's kind of this unrelenting hitting of the same notes and themes. Imagine there's 2 of these a day, so there's a lot to draw from. I listen to a small proportion of what's out there. But
our listeners should thank you for doing this for them so that they don't have to do it themselves. I thank you.
We will not include the War Room in the show notes. No need to link to that.
But what's fascinating is that almost every other episode is kind of hitting the same themes. And they're bringing along a lot of the same hosts on. And they're taking a lot of current events and interpreting them to hammer these same themes. And so you always hear that the election of 2020 was stolen. So there's the whole stop the steal stuff. They're really protective of January 6th. It wasn't an insurrection. These are patriots. They were just protesting. They talk a lot about the financial system, how corrupt it is, that it could on the verge of collapse. They talk about how money is made and stuff like that, and Ponzi scheme type stuff. A lot of distrust in the major media. They despise what we would call the transhumanists, the AI, developers. They are really scared of these people. They believe this is going to cause existential risk.
As we've discussed, we might agree with some of
Well, that's the thing, And then they'll switch back to distrust of vaccines, fomenting about border security. And then they cut to the ads with a great theme song of the rapper Chinese billionaire guy.
Miles Go.
Unbelievable. So the style, they have better ads than we do, I got to say.
Well, the guy that writes the copy for our ads is horrendous.
He probably gets paid a lot for those ads, buy gold, a lot of stuff like that.
This hammering home of one message is a pretty deep contrast to what we do on Crazy Town and more broadly at PCI. I feel like we live in the gray space. We're kind of looking for nuance, new angles on what's going on. Not to say that we never discuss the same theme from one episode to another.
I do the opposites overlap a lot, probably.
Probably, but I feel like we're...
And our jokes.
I feel like we're actually searching for different angles.
Right. We don't want to bore the audience.
Right. Maybe we should switch, though. We should just have two things we say over and over.
Over and over again.
Yeah. Well, here he is using media in different forms to sort of manipulate people. What is he trying to instill? I would say it's fueling this vitriol, this hatred, this division, and the distrust of elites, which is kind of ironic considering the guy is, comes from a pretty elite.
So wait, one of these false prophets is actually a hypocrite. Yeah, that's what you're telling me.
I know. It's amazing. And unfortunately, there's a lot of truth in the distrust.
I tell you, I'm like nodding along with the guy sometimes going, wow, okay.
So he's almost got you to make the turn. You're almost a traditionalist.
And then he just goes off on something insane.
Just keep listening. You'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, something that's also interesting that he keeps pushing is that this is the time, this is the actual natural time for a crisis to unfold that will crash the system and bring forth a new age that is going to be better. And it actually... It comes from one of his favorite books. There was a book in 1997 by these academics, Strauss and Howe, and called The Fourth Turning. And they argue that there's these generational cycles, 4 generations, 80 to 90 years per cycle about throughout history. And that right now we're in one of these collapse phases. And Bannon identified the 2008-2009 financial crisis as sort of the beginning of this new era, this fourth turning. And he basically looked to Trump as the political figure who can just keep pushing us through this crisis, break it down, because in the crisis, the old has to fall for the new to rise.
It's really astonishing, that really disquieting to me parallels.
Yes.
Because, we also saw what happened in 2008 and 2009, not just with what happened in the financial markets and the housing market, but also what was happening with the energy system.
Yes.
Oil prices going up to $147 a barrel in 2008 and then crashing. And before shale came online, seeing that we were hitting the wall with conventional oil. And we saw that as a turning point too. Our colleague Richard Heinberg wrote a book called The End of Growth, in that period.
Right. This could be it, And he actually, one of his movies is called Generation Zero. That's Bannon's movie in 2010. And it basically follows the Strauss and Howe argument and saying, this is the time.
You're not giving him enough credit here, too. He's the writer and director of Generation Zero.
Nice.
And over there on IMDb, the user approval rating, he's got a 3.3, which is probably the worst I've ever seen out of a 10. It's really good movies get up into the 8s, right? And a crummy action movie, run-of-the-mill, gets a 6 or something.
Yeah, but this is a conspiracy of elites who just go onto IMDb or whatever and downrate his stuff.
It's true. Well,
the real people love it.
But imagine watching a movie that's just filled with Newt Gingrich and John Bolton and other fun chaps like that.
No, I will say, so Jason, your point about the fourth turning, I think there's probably 2 things there. One is it could be a great communication sort of tool to sort of say to people, this is the time. Now you got to do this. Put it into context so people feel, in a sense, emboldened.
It's a normal historical event we're part of.
You should be doing this. I also think he has been a student of history and is really fascinated by it, and probably does believe in these cycles as well, right?
Yeah, and that's something I kind of think in cycles too. So I kind of with him there, maybe.
I guess the last thing I just want to point out, just we're talking about sort of different tactics and ways that the guy has been trying to engender this sort of collapse of the social order, political system, whatever you want to call it now. He's also been supporting geopolitical discord, you could say, right? So funding nationalist movements around the world, literally with a group that's based in Brussels called The Movement, which, Rob, I'm just waiting for the joke here. Maybe I'll just move on.
Just keep it going.
Keep it going. Everyone knows.
But can I also just say this is a weird tactic to go, I'm going to go global to go nationalist.
Well, no, it makes actually a lot of sense. You want to, so, I actually wonder, you talked about that Chinese billionaire dude, right? Who,
yeah. I hope we're pronouncing his name right. Go Wengwei, something like that. Yeah. Milo Go.
Which I think, has a really fascinating story himself. But, somehow Bannon is in bed with the dude, and maybe that relationship is also about, again, trying to create this discord. If you want to recreate a national identity, if you want to create a more traditional society here in the United States, break down the geopolitical order, globalization,
tear up the TARP, and the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement.
When this guy you shared with me, Jason, his one of the ways he's related to Bannon, and that's Bannon uses his song.
Yes, it's wonderful. And almost every transition in the podcast is this rap song by this guy.
Weird.
So weird. Jason sent me the video to this thing, and you see Go on a yacht shouting, "Take down the CCP." So
right. The Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, and he wants to make it safe for him to, I guess, get more billions, because he's on the deck of his yacht smoking a 12-inch cigar.
Yeah.
And doing some weird kung fu shadow boxing stuff.
And he switches between great outfits, an all-white suit, a sort of traditional Chinese kind of gown.
Can we at least put this in the show notes?
Well, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe send people the video.
I'm a huge kung fu fan, and he's terrible at it.
He's not good at it.
It's
the
not
worst
good.
shadow boxing I've ever seen.
But I have to say, of comedy yacht videos, this one ranks number 3.
I don't think it's supposed to be a comedy.
Regardless of the intention, it's clearly a comedy.
It's hysterical. I actually think the tune is kind of catchy.
But let's see.
We're losing Jason.
Let me put the rank. Yeah, I know he's off in war room land. Strip that shirt off. So number 1 goes to worldwide prestige, Boats and Hose from the movie Step Brothers with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly.
Yeah.
Number 2 is the Lonely Island's "I'm on a Boat." From Saturday Night Live.
Those are better. They're better, I agree.
Yeah, they're funnier, but Go is pretty funny, too.
It's hysterical, especially since it's not supposed to be. All right, so we've got another species here that we haven't had yet.
Ooh, so exciting.
This is very exciting. This one is Homo vandali, or what I call the nom familiar is Molotov mixologist. So these guys are basically, willing to throw the Molotov cocktail, burn down the house. And essentially they look at these existing power structures as locked in, irredeemable, likely to fall from their own defects. And so they then justify blowing things up sooner to get over with. Or, more modestly, stoking the political chaos like what Bannon does.
Yeah.
And this somehow... They believe they will come out on top of the rubble. And I would say that, there's a lot of discussion in the taxonomic treatment that this may be a species that has multiple species within it, is currently circumscribed. I'm not sure. Because there's some very different philosophies out there that believe in this strategy.
Yeah, what you just described could easily be, we're talking about Bannon, but he could easily be somebody that's sort of on a far left spectrum.
Right. So I have the type specimen is Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, right.
Which is sort of he's the darling of some of the anarcho-primitivists.
Right, the Unabomber with his manifesto.
Yes. So anyhow, I think this is an important point because Bannon tries to keep himself clean a bit. He tries to say that he is not, into the sort of the violent and stuff. He tries to back out from some of these things. But he's stoking the hatred and the division and funding a lot of stuff that ends up getting into these like fascist type of movements. So here's a quote from somebody who carried out a terrible, horrific attack. Why did you carry out the attack? To add momentum to the pendulum swings of history, further destabilizing and polarizing Western society in order to eventually destroy the current nihilistic, hedonistic, individualistic insanity that has taken control of Western thought. So that is part of like the description of that's somebody explaining why they basically shot up a church.
Molotov mixologist. So what have we learned by looking at Bannon's sordid history and this whole traditionalist and let's blow it up Molotov mixologist way that he's promoting?
One thing for me is it's important to differentiate him, I think, from the ecosystem of other people you could look at and sort of say are of a similar vein. So like an Alex Jones, for example, right? Okay. You know, you could look at them at the surface and say, oh, these guys are kind of the same, right? They're over-the-top rhetoric. They're promulgating conspiracy theories, whatever. They're scaring the pants off of people. But, you know, Alex Jones is like fucking grifter. I mean, the guy is out there espousing shit that is some of the most heinous, disgusting, disturbing things you could imagine. He's sort of doing it to upsell his vitamins or whatever the fuck it is. Like, I think Bannon really believes, like, he has a mission here.
He is more a political animal.
He is doing things with intentionality that's not just about trying to, you know, to run ads and make money. I'm sure he's running ads and making money too, but like he's got a purpose, a mission, which makes him in some ways a lot more dangerous than the Alex Jones of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the ahas for me is something you referenced a little earlier about how disturbing it is that we can agree with Bannon on a lot of points.
Yeah, it really is disturbing.
Our close ally, Douglas Rushkoff, for example, would probably also agree with him on some of these points. And
yeah, he wrote an essay about being invited to Bannon's show, The War Room. Yeah, it's called how to avoid becoming a fascist, and he explains why he didn't go on the show.
Yeah. Well, and you know, in Bannon, you mentioned how he's looking at an 80-year cycle. We've talked about that with Peter Turchin and these cycles in history and sort of looking at how do societies adapt to changing conditions.
And the adaptive cycle we referred to quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And there's the idea that infinite progress is not something that we're going to see. So
a real distrust and critique of technology and runaway technology.
Yeah, and maybe even some of this, we need more local self-reliance type stuff. You know, we would try to look at that in a pro-social way as opposed to the kind of scapegoating and build the wall sort of way that Bannon does, but there's some piece of that you could say is in common. So I think, you know, this happens a lot with false prophets. There's some nugget of truth in there, right? And they can kind of hook intelligent people with the truths, and then they go off in some set of conclusions that's just taking us the wrong direction.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what I often, when I get in discussions with people about, you know, our way of thinking, they often get nervous because they think like if you scare people, if people think there's going to be like limits or scarcity, then they're going to go down this tact of like shaming and outgrouping, and they worry about this.
Well, they'll do that, or they'll do the prepping thing, or they'll do the fatalism thing.
Yes,
and it's a real danger.
It is a danger. But what upsets me is that if we leave, like, so many people resonate, you know, like we're nodding along with some of Bannon's stuff. Yeah. So many people resonate with his critique and this dissatisfaction with the status quo and the distrust of the system, and which he's actively undermining, of course, but there is definitely truth in there. And on the far left, you've got these, you know, Ted Kaczynski type followers, the anarcho-primitivists, who want to collapse the industrial system so it doesn't end up killing all life on Earth. And Bannon doesn't seem to have much of an ecological mindset. But you can see how, you know, the right and the left come together wanting to burning it down at these extremes. And so what's frustrating then to me, and what I often argue with people, and we've gotten into this before, you know, when I talked to Bob Jensen, and we had this episode that dealt with ecofascism. Yeah. If we don't have any progressive or visions that are on the maybe populist side, right, that acknowledge people's pain and upset and the corruption, then the voices of the Bannons are going to own this narrative of this broken system that can't be fixed. It needs to be replaced. And so that's an aha I'd like to bring here is like, no, we really need voices that are more of the centrist progressive end of things.
Yeah, I see that, and that's obviously dangerous if there's no one to fill the void. I think there's another huge danger in the whole collapse the system thinking, whether it's a Bannon style or Kaczynski style or whatever, whoever's aiming for that is. I got to think the assumption is that something better emerges out of the rubble. Like the phoenix rises from the ashes, right. And we've got suddenly a better nation or a better government or a better ecosystem or whatever. But that's a really screwy thought, because usually when you wipe something clean, it's not like the utopia just emerges, right?
Right.
I went to a doctor and I was having gut problems, and I said, well, what if you just give me a bunch of antibiotics and we just nuke my gut and start over? And she was like, no, it's a terrible idea because you're just going to have the most virulent bacteria colonizing your gut first. The most aggressive stuff is going to take over. And I kind of see that as a way more likely outcome.
Yeah.
The sort of Walking Dead, meanest, baddest people will kind of have the power if we just wipe out the system.
No, we go down that path, and it's just horrific. It's hard to turn it off once it starts unraveling.
Well, let's just say the Bannon path is horrific either way, right? Because if they are successful, what's the end result? A traditionalist world where women are subjugated.
I think there was a Hulu series about that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Great. This is great.
Okay, insufferability index. I'm thinking we make
God, this is gonna be so hard.
We make it a
10,
record.
10.
We make it a record
10,
here.
It's 10.
Well, look, I think like I'm saying, it's a 0 to 10 criteria. Blah blah blah. What do I do with the fact that a couple of ideas I'm like, I'm aligned with them? It's hard to give them a full high score from those. Do I take off a point? I want to start at 10 because it's just awful. But maybe I got to back up.
Start off.
This is the first time you've ever started with a 10 and then deducted points.
It's
towards
easier that
being
way.
So start at a 10 and maybe take one off. That's what I was going to do.
All right, I'll just take one off. I'm giving it a 9.
Me too.
I'm giving him a 10.
Okay.
You guys suck.
Other podcasts ask for a lot of stuff. Buy their merch, join their Patreon, donate your left kidney. But we're just asking you to share the show. If you're like me and you find it funny and thought-provoking, then please tell 3 friends. Hit that share button and get some other people joining us in Crazy Town.
Every decision I've ever made in my entire life has been wrong. My life is the complete opposite of everything I want it to be.
If every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right.
Okay, we just heard from George Costanza. He always introduces our Do the Opposite segment. I think we might need to rethink this, guys. There's a little-known fact about Steve Bannon, as if we didn't have enough stinking little-known facts about him. But every time Seinfeld episode gets aired, Steve Bannon makes some money.
Oh,
so
God.
we're helping this dude?
I didn't get to play a whole freaking episode.
Okay.
What do you mean though?
So he was a producer, right? So
he was an investment banker, merger acquisitions kind of guy.
Got some kind of tie to the whole Seinfeld deal where he gets royalties off of it.
Oh my God!
I know. I want royalties off of Seinfeld.
Yeah.
So to do the opposite, we got to do the opposite of our clip, and
I think we need to have.
Let's just talk to our attorney.
I think we need to have some kind of bot reading it instead of George Costanza.
Okay. Right. No, on a more serious note, doing the opposite. If Bannon is about sowing discord, breaking down trust in our institutions and our collective enterprise or collective experiment together, I think doing the opposite is promoting and practicing mutual aid, right? Mutual aid, solidarity, social cohesion over division. Even without the Bannons of the world trying to basically light the puppy on fire, we've got a lot energy going in the wrong direction in terms of social media splintering people and the stresses that are being felt throughout the modern system.
Well, literally successionist movements in states.
Right.
But we have that going on right here. Like the entire eastern half of Oregon is looking to secede and become part of Idaho.
Yeah.
But even without Bannon out there kind of, stoking the fires, we're having all kinds of crises that are hitting us now and are going to worsen: climate, energy shocks, economic, what have you. So what we actually need are to put in place efforts that build social ties, that build mutual aid and solidarity. We actually explored this in a 2-part series that PCI did. Rob, you were part of it. I was part of it as well, looking at mutual aid. It was called Mutual Aid and the Great Unraveling.
Yeah, I got to interview Dean Spade as part of that, who's a law professor up in Washington, and he wrote a book called Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. And it was kind of opening my eyes that, you throw around terms like mutual aid. I mean, there's actually kind of a rich history there and a method to it. And I'm not going to claim to be an expert. In fact, I'm planning to go through that book in much more detail, but I would encourage our listeners to check that out.
Okay, so we'll have links in the show notes. How do you find it? Can you search for this easily on PCI's website?
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay, great. I also think that as Bannon is trying to sow distrust in collective institutions, maybe we should think about building trust. And the building of the trust happens only if you participate to make them more trustworthy, to make them more transparent. And of course, that's a lot easier to do if you're local. So there is actually a series of 25 articles at resilience.org called Democracy Rising. It was organized, or the Deliberative Democracy series, actually, organized by Tom Prue. And it's about really focusing on community-led democracy. So how do you get together and deliberate and sort of share power and decision making? And I think it's a very useful thing to do, especially as for this mutual aid process. Be ready to like work together and get through the crisis we're going to be facing.
And I'll just add another resource along those lines, which is there's an international group called the Global Tapestry of Alternatives that has done a lot of work, Ashish Kothari and Shrishti Bajpai and others there, supporting these networks and models of different forms of collaborative democracy and decision-making in communities all around the world. So it's not just looking at how we could do that in a place like the United States, but in other places as well.
I mean, because part of what I think about is like if these guys are talking about how democracy has failed, the question really is how well have we really worked to make the democracy what it can be. And I think we really haven't put enough effort into that.
Yeah. And I think for the three of us, our do the opposite charge is to go get jobs at Goldman Sachs so that we can fund these deliberative democracy initiatives.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
You think will they have us?
Oh, no doubt.
I'm going to go get a Harvard MBA right now.
Well, thanks for listening. If you made it this far, then maybe you actually like the show.
Yeah, and maybe you even consider yourself a real inhabitant of Crazy Town. Someone like us, who we affectionately call a Crazy Townee.
If that's the case, then there's one very simple thing you can do to help us out. Share the podcast, or even just this episode.
Yeah, text 3 people you know who you think would get a kick out of hearing from us bozos.
Or if you want to go way old school, then tell them about the podcast face to face.
Please, for the love of God, if enough people listen to this podcast, maybe one day we can all escape from Crazy Town. We're just asking for 3 people, a little bit of sharing. We can do this. We all know about the Patriots plotting to take down the grid. Before they do, all good Christians should prepare to thrive without the trappings of hedonistic, corporate profit-maximizing, modern utility services. And sure, you can buy a set of PV panels, but these so-called renewables are weak and funded by satanic liberal companies with a globalist agenda. Also, the supply chains for these solar devices fund dictators, and most are made by the CCP. And that is why I'm encouraging Crazy Town listeners to invest in one particular precious metal. Sure, you probably already have silver, gold, and platinum, which are essential once the banks are shuttered. But those aren't enough. Perhaps the most important metal you can possess to secure the safety and comfort of your family is uranium. With the Home Uranium Kit, you will have a piping hot slab with thousands of applications. Drop in a bathtub and heat the water in minutes. Toss it in the oven and bake your potatoes. And at night, my friends, it will gently glow and lighten any room. Mined and refined in America, the Home Uranium Kit should be in every patriot's pantry. Now to get these, go to homeuraniumkit.com and put in the code CrazyTown to get 10% off your slab of hot American uranium. That's homeuraniumkit.com, purchase code CrazyTown.
Crazy Town, da 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 da, Crazy Town.